we don't see is like their team of 10 or their publicist or whatever who's making it all happen, and they make it look so easy. And then we think like, okay, I need to be doing this because she's doing this. Early on, just kind of decided like, I've got to figure out what I want to do and not compare myself to what other people are doing and do it because I think I should do it. For anyone listening, we've heard it all before, like, what's your why? But it is super relevant.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. What it do? Happy week to all or sad week to y'all, depending on how you are feeling. I'm feeling all the feels because I've just performed 4 nights in a row, Blaze and Wide Open. I played Blaze. I played a suicidal comedian who died by suicide in 2018. And in Wide Open, I'm performing my original work, sharing a story about my experience mentoring a grieving child throughout the pandemic. So every night in LA, I'm sharing something related to grief, which is pretty awesome. Last night, one of the other stories in the show, think The Moth. This is a storytelling experience with monologues and original scenes written by writers around the world. So there is one story about a mom who lost her 12-year-old child, Molly, in the pandemic in a biking accident. And the actress, Jill Remez, does such a beautiful job of sharing this. And yet the writer herself, Kay, showed up last night in Brentwood, and there was a Q&A after, and we got to speak with the actors and the writers. I myself am both, so that was cool, and people got to ask us questions. It was really, really cool. And Kay just talking about what it was like having lost her daughter so recently in an accident. It was just heartbreaking, beyond imagine. She is also a breast cancer survivor, so it was, as you can imagine, she got a lot of questions. My mom was in town to see these shows. That was powerful. I do address her cancer in my own story, so all the feels there. So that has been a heavy 5 days in a row of shows. Those are my updates for this week. And if you're listening and you would like to see Wide Open and see me perform my original work and 9 other original stories, many pertaining to grief, you can check us out on May 15th on Zoom at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's for anyone. You don't have to be in LA. That's what's great about Zoom. So if you would like to come, DM me on Instagram at DyingOfLaughterPodcast, and we will set up a comp or a discount for you. Okay, today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're seeking professional and licensed therapy from home, I cannot recommend this service enough. I've been using them for 2 years. I love virtual therapy. Of course, in person is also powerful. I'm an advocate for both. But what is cool is virtual therapy is something that you can commit to more easily than perhaps going in person. If you work from home, if you have kids, if you don't feel like going somewhere, if you're at risk for COVID, if you are X, Y, or Z, virtual therapy is a great option. So we are so grateful to BetterHelp for partnering with us this season. You can receive a juicy discount at betterhelp.com/DOL, as in dying of laughter. So that's betterhelp.com/DOL for a discount on your first month of therapy to see if it's a fit for you. I found my therapist through BetterHelp. Shout out to Dina, adore you. So that is my plug for them today. Jumping into today's episode, we have Dara Kurtz. She has survived breast cancer and also lost her mom, and we will be sharing all of that today. So Dara Kurtz, after being diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 42, left her 20-year career as a financial advisor to focus on writing and speaking. Today, her personal blog, Crazy Perfect Life, reaches over 200,000 followers. That's at crazyperfectlife.com. Dara is the author of 3 books, her most recent being I Am My Mother's Daughter, Wisdom on Life, Loss, and Love. Dara's goal is to use her life experiences to help people strengthen their relationships and create more happiness and joy in their everyday lives. We love that. Her mom died of cancer when she was 52 in 1999, a few weeks after she had her first daughter. So Dara, let's jump into this episode. I love that she talks about her transition to becoming a writer and speaker. That is something I think many people listening might be interested in. And surviving breast cancer in and of itself is a whole conversation, as is losing her mom. Today, we address both. Thank you, Dara, for being here. Let's do this. Stay tuned for next week where therapist Brenna Guinan is interviewing me about having my funeral-themed birthday party a few weeks ago. So we have that coming up next week. And the following week, we have the co-founder of Modern Loss, Rebecca Sofer, sharing her new integrative grief guide that is going to be available on Amazon. So we have really juicy speakers and fabulous women coming up the next few weeks. So that's a little sneak preview behind the curtain. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, Yodo, you only die once. Thank you so much, Dara, for being here today. I'm really looking forward to diving into your story and sharing it with our listeners. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So if you don't mind sharing with listeners a little bit more about where you grew up and who you grew up with. I know we're honoring your mother today, as well as would love to hear more from your experience as being a cancer survivor. If you could share some of your background with our listeners.
So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I grew up with my mom and my dad and my brother. We lived together. And I always say that we kind of were like the Waltons, which is a really old show, but like at night, I would say like, good night, mom, good night, dad. And then my brother would be like, good night, Dara, good night, mom. Like we were just all a really close family. And so I don't think I realized like how blessed I was to grow up in that environment until I got older and really until I lost my mom. And then we didn't have that. And so that was just devastating. I think the fact that we were so close made that loss that much harder.
Thank you for sharing that. And the Waltons image is really cute. And yet also it's really appreciated when people are able to share about their story. And can you talk a little bit more about what was it like losing your mom at 28 versus today? How has your grief evolved over time?
So we found out the same weekend that I was pregnant that my mom had stage 4 melanoma, which is a form of skin cancer. And so really the bigger my belly got, the sicker my mom got. And my first daughter, this was my first child, she was a month early and my mom passed away just a few weeks after she was born. And so I really found myself in this space where I was thrilled to have a new baby and be a mom myself. And I was devastated at having lost my mom. And it was like two extremes, like the joy and then just the desperation. And it was incredibly hard and challenging. I mean, besides the fact that I was just exhausted from not sleeping and, trying to figure all that out, my heart was broken. And I did the best that I could to navigate through that. But I didn't have a lot of friends that had lost a parent. And, every relationship is different. And my mom was my person. And so I was so devastated at not being able to share all of the joy of my baby with my mom. And I think that just compounded that loss and heightened it so much. And so time just kind of went on and I really didn't grieve. I really kind of pushed it away. And instead I threw myself into life. I was a financial advisor at the time and I went back to work after, I don't know, I think it was 3 months of maternity leave because I needed to go back to work. Like staying in the house with a baby was not what I needed to be doing. I was so sad. And time went on and I got used to sort of being busy and hectic and all the things. And I didn't grieve. It was such a delayed experience until much, much later in my life.
I think that's relatable of jumping right back into something. That's something I hear a lot. It's something that I felt I certainly did when I was grieving. And people are always like, how did you go back to work? How did you do it? And it's like the momentum and the excitement of life kind of gets you through it for better or worse. And yet, did you find there was a time later in your life where it was hitting you in a deeper way?
Yeah. So, I always say that grief followed me around like my shadow because it was always there. Like I would take my daughter to a birthday party and there would be grandparents there and they would be, so having fun and getting to see their grandchild turn 1 or 3 or 10. It didn't even, whatever. And I would feel that loss, mother-daughter events at school or just all the things. It was always there. And I felt like I always sort of had this layer of sadness that sort of could be disrupted at any time if I was kind of pressed enough, if you will. And there were lots of times I would be at parties or I would be somewhere and something would sort of trigger me and I would go into the bathroom and I would just like feel myself, like I would just go into a stall and I would start crying at a party because someone said something to me or whatever. And then I would go out of the bathroom and I would just kind of say like, okay, Dara, you don't want to completely mess up your makeup. And I would try to like take a deep breath and say, okay, and let's move on. But it was always there. And I think it is going to always be there. But when I was really, it's just recently been the 20th anniversary of my mom's death. And that's when I randomly remembered that I had a Ziploc bag of letters in my house. And the letters were written to me when I first went to sleepaway camp when I was 9 until I graduated from college, mostly from my mom. And it honestly wasn't until I sat down and opened that bag and read her words that I finally gave myself permission and had the courage to release the pain and the sadness. And that's 20 years after her death.
Wow, that's such a powerful image to think of this bag of letters. I love that you found that and that you had those. And that's so interesting about the freedom or the peace or the X, Y, or Z that it brought to move through those feelings. I wonder what people can take away from that. I mean, I'm such a fan of writing everything down and, having seen people lose someone and then have all of these financial burdens or emotional burdens because they don't know passwords and things like that. I think the power of letter writing is really what's coming through. Have you heard of those books that are like, what are they called? They're like, write a letter to your baby, and they come with books and it's like, write a letter to every single year of someone's life. Have you seen those?
Yeah. So I have so many things to share. So for starters, I would say that what that experience did for me is sitting on the couch one night, finally having the courage to open this bag. And there were over 100 letters in this bag. And I started reading them, like I could, seeing my mom's handwriting, and then I could see the postmarked, the dates. And so it was pretty amazing how I felt like I was getting to know her better from my adult perspective, because when she wrote a lot of those letters, I was a child, but she was raising her kids. And so it was such a huge gift to be able to get a glimpse into who she was raising her kids and, what was going on. And she talked a lot about work and balance and family life, just all the things. But she was a really positive person. And the biggest gift of that experience was getting to see how much she valued life and how much I realized she would never have wanted me to let the sadness that I was feeling from her death get in the way of me making the most of every day of my life. And that's what I kept reading and seeing really just over and over again in a lot of the letters. And that's what helped me so much sort of say, okay, it's time for me to give myself permission to make peace with her death. And I'm not letting her down by doing that. And I'm not walking away from her by doing that. And it really changed everything for me. I mean, it changed my joyfulness. It changed, my happiness. And I feel like I'm a pretty happy person, but, just even being able to kind of release that and giving myself that permission was amazing. But it also made me realize the power of the written word and how incredible it is to tell the people that you love and care about how you feel, and doing it through the handwritten word. And in my book, I talk a lot about the different kinds of letters, because it taught me that there are different kinds of letters and how to write them. And, I give people so many prompts and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, like writing a letter to people that you love and care about is the biggest gift that you can give to them. And even though I live with my husband and my daughters, both my daughters are in college now, we write each other letters. You don't even have to not live in the same house with people to write them a letter. And, you put it on their pillow, and there's a lot of beautiful ways that you can do that. But as for the baby book, someone gave me one of those as a gift, and I had nothing but good intentions. And, that's never happened.
Right.
So, I think it's a beautiful concept. I was doing a Zoom event with someone, and we were talking about my book and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I just had a granddaughter and I'm going to send my son a letter to my granddaughter every year on her birthday. And I'm going to have my son put it in a special box to give to her when she's 18. And I thought that was amazing. So there's lots of ways you can do it.
Yes, love that so much. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? If you don't end up doing like the perfect book gift thing. And I love that letter writing is free, right? I mean, you can do it on a piece of printer paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. And yet the meaning that it holds is so powerful. So
exactly. I mean, it's really all about what you say and writing from your heart. And who cares if you spell a word wrong or, you cross out a word or blah, blah, blah. Like perfection is so overrated. Just do it, right? Just write from your heart.
Right. That's a really beautiful reflection. And it's something that I think, in today's age where there's so many photos all the time, which is awesome, but there is something different about taking the time to write a letter as opposed to like, we have all these pictures together. And, my dad was paralyzed before he could text, like when phones came out. This like makes it sound like a long time ago, but which it was in the 90s. So
yeah, no. But I mean, you're right. It's such a good point.
He didn't text, or I don't have emails or letters because of his paralysis. And that's, part of the impetus why I'm passionate about all of this is like, oh yeah, there are things that I feel like I could share that would be helpful, but also it's not anyone's fault that it was the 90s and it's just, people just didn't have pictures then. But now I do feel like everyone has a lot more photos and memories and mementos of their loved one. But good point about the letters and not just pictures. One question that I ask all guests on this podcast is about their goldfish moment. And what I mean by that is the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way in childhood. Is there something that comes to mind? Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a child, I want to say I was like around, I don't know, 8 or 9, somewhere around there. My very best friend, her mom had breast cancer. And she basically passed away from breast cancer. I want to say we were 9 when that happened. So that's interesting. It's right when I went to camp too. But I remember going to her house and her mom was really sick. And I remember just really what that felt like. And her mom would get out of bed to, be with us, but they had also a helper there. And I remember the helper would make us lunch. And then I remember the day that she passed away and going into my mom's room, my parents' room, and sitting on the bed and crying with my mom because I was so scared that something was going to happen to her. And I remember just sobbing and my mom telling me, like, there's no guarantees. I can't promise you that something's not going to happen to me. All we can do is make the most out of the time we have together. And, that's always stayed with me. And then when I was 42, I heard the words, you have breast cancer. And that was so terrifying for me because, well, for so many reasons. My kids were 11 and 14, and that was devastating. But I remembered when I was a child, and I remembered when my best friend's mom passed away from breast cancer, and we were so young, and I knew what that felt like, where I watched my friend navigate life without her mom. And then I was just so terrified that history was going to repeat itself. And so it triggered a lot in me when I was going through treatment and such.
Absolutely. And can you talk a little bit more about this? I'm really interested in what that was like being a cancer survivor. I mean, what that's still like after having lost your mom, who did die of a different kind of cancer. And I'm so sorry that this has been your experience, and I appreciate that you share your story with others. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, no, of course. I am so grateful every day of my life. And I talk openly and honestly about all of my experiences with the hope of helping other people. So I don't take the fact that I am healthy for granted at all. Like, I'm so grateful. But it was incredibly challenging to have to go through that because at the end of the day, like, I knew how hard it was to be a daughter in the world without her mom. And my kids were 11 and 14, and I was terrified I was going to die. So when I was 42, I found a lump completely out of the blue, and I found it relatively early, but I wanted to be as aggressive as possible. So I literally like immediately had a double mastectomy. I had reconstruction, but I also went through chemotherapy, and that was devastating for my kids and for me because I was literally so sick. I wasn't someone that sailed through it. I mean, I just felt like shit. I was so nauseous, blah, blah, blah. But for them to see me without my hair and, just all of that, it really was just hard, so hard for my family. But then, after I got through that, and I did radiation as well, and every genetic test, and nothing ever showed up, and blah, 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 all the things. But after that experience, I basically remember the doctor saying, okay, Dara, you're done. Go back to living your life. And I remember just feeling like, how do I live my life? Like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And I was terrified. And I remember basically thinking, okay, I have two choices. I can be completely terrified and stay in that space for the rest of my life, or I can try to figure this out. Like I can try to figure out what it means to be a cancer survivor and how am I going to make the most out of the rest of my life? And what am I going to do? And so thank goodness, I'm so glad that for whatever reason, I decided to do so much work on myself. I mean, I basically like read every possible thing you could read. I started practicing Kundalini yoga, which it's a huge game changer. And I was always really health focused, but I started to even, that looked even a little bit differently than it did before. I quit my job. I told my husband, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to think about money all day long. So I'm pretty much done being a financial advisor. I want to write books, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do whatever feels right. And I gave myself permission and space, and it was hard. It was work. I went to counselors. I mean, I had two counselors at one time. They didn't know about each other. And I would see one on one week, and then I would see the other on the other week. So I saw one once a week, but like they thought I was seeing, every other. Anyway.
That's amazing.
A girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. But yeah, at the end of the day, like I just thank God, I'm so grateful. Like I found how to be happy and how to be joyful. And that doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I get scared or I don't hear a story that doesn't trigger me. But, I feel like I'm happy and doing everything I can do to make the most out of every day. And I feel like your mental health is just such an important part of your physical health. And before cancer, I was so sad. I was so just depressed and down. I wasn't really vibrating at a very high level, and so is it all related? I kind of think it is. We won't ever know that for sure, but I was sad and, really missing my mom and all of those things. And did that impact my physical health? I don't see how it couldn't have, but again, there are things that science can't necessarily prove, but I choose to believe that that's, it all impacts everything.
That's really interesting. And I appreciate you talking about your transition and your career and everything. And it is interesting how things are related. And I'm glad to hear that your genetic testing did not come back positive. My mom does not have any of the breast cancer mutations that we know of.
Exactly. That we know of, because a couple other women in my family have had breast cancer. And I mean, I just tell my daughters, I'm like, you know what? Knowledge is power, and you're going to be watched. And I wasn't being watched. So, hashtag you win, right? Like we're going to keep an eye on you, and knowledge and power and science and all of those things. Every day they're coming up with new things.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you found it early and yet were aggressive with your treatment. Not that it's my, place to say what people do, but I mean, just after I've seen everything my mom's had, I'm like, I would go aggressive with treatment. I mean, I talked to some people who don't go double mastectomy route, and for whatever reason, if that comes back, I think that's really devastating. So I think I just appreciate you sharing that you're aggressive.
No, I totally agree with you. And, I've met so many people in the cancer space, and my first book was called Crush Cancer, and I did a lot of speaking in that area. Yeah. And it is such an individual choice, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, I literally remember sitting in the room and this doctor was telling me the news and I was sobbing. And my first question was, am I going to lose my hair? Like that was so important to me. Am I going to lose my hair? And I just remember he had this look on his face, like he was just felt so bad. And he nodded and he's like, yeah, you are. But the fact that that was even my first question, not, I'm definitely going to do, and I knew I was going to do chemo and I knew I was going to be as aggressive as possible. But instead of focusing on like, yes, I'm doing this because, I want to be able to live for the rest of whatever, like hair grows back, but it's just such a hard decision. And so I would say to anyone listening, like, yes, I mean, if you can be as aggressive as possible, you're doing it for your future and for your family's future, but it's such a personal thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you wish the daughters of women and people with breast cancer knew about their mom's experiences? And I ask because, every situation's different, but I also don't talk to a ton of people who it was similar in the way that my mom was 44 when she was diagnosed and we were 6 and 8 at the time. So what do you wish the daughters of breast cancer patients and survivors knew about their mom's journeys? Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're seeking professional and licensed therapy from home, I cannot recommend this service enough. I've been using them for 2 years. I love virtual therapy. Of course, in person is also powerful. I'm an advocate for both. But what is cool is virtual therapy is something that you can commit to more easily than perhaps going in person. If you work from home, if you have kids, if you don't feel like going somewhere, if you're at risk for COVID, if you are X, Y, or Z, virtual therapy is a great option. So we are so grateful to BetterHelp for partnering with us this season. You can receive a juicy discount at betterhelp.com/DOL, as in dying of laughter. So that's betterhelp.com/DOL for a discount on your first month of therapy to see if it's a fit for you. I found my therapist through BetterHelp. Shout out to Dina, adore you. So that is my plug for them today.
Yeah, I mean, not even just breast cancer, like really any cancer. I mean, I think that, I guess the biggest thing I would say is that your mom's story is not your story. And that was something that was really important that I recognized when I first was diagnosed, because I was just convinced that like my mom had, she had melanoma and they told her that she was going to be fine. And then 5 years later, she wasn't fine. And so I was convinced that, that was going to be my story. And I just remember this nurse turned to me one day and she's like, Dara, your mom's story is not your story. Stop. Like I was just so stuck in that. So, I think when daughters see whatever they see, it imprints, right? Like whatever my daughters have seen, it's imprinted on their life and they're going to always remember that. And it's going to trigger things that whatever comes up in the future. But also like, whatever happened to my mom doesn't necessarily mean that has to happen to me. And I think, like I said earlier, like knowledge is power. Like we can learn from what our moms go through. And, we can take that and we can use it to make our lives better. And I think our moms would want us to do that. And then having daughters and being sick is really hard because you don't want your daughter to see you not feeling well, and you want to protect your daughter and you want to protect your kids. And I'm sure that your dad wanted to protect you and, your mom wanted to protect you, but we don't get to choose what our kids are forced to see. So I had to let go of a lot of guilt about that because I think it's easy for parents to feel really guilty about something that maybe they're going through and how it's impacting their kids when they didn't have any control over it.
Thank you for sharing that. That was, helpful to me. That was a question definitely for me because I was like, this relates. And yet for people listening too. And with breast cancer, unfortunately is more common than we would like it to be. It does impact a lot of people.
Oh, prevalent. Yes. Everyone listening to this podcast has friends that have gone through it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why do you, there's not really an answer to this, but I wonder, why do you think that is, if you have an opinion there?
I think our environment for sure, our diets for sure. I think I try to eat really cleanly and I've always tried to force my daughters to eat really cleanly. All of the factors, the emotional, there's some emotional aspects in there as well. I don't know. there's so many different things. Maybe it's your genetic history as well, or whatever that gets triggered or woken up because of environmental factors or whatever. But now I'm in a place where, I just try to take as best care as I can of myself. And I try to eat really cleanly and get lots of sleep and manage my stress and exercise. And then you know what? I got to let it go.
Yeah.
And if you think about your health all the time, you're not helping yourself.
Right. I like that you're able to let it go. It's like you do the best you can. And even the things you said are a lot more than a lot of people do, to your credit. It always feels like there's more you can do. But no, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't eat clean and don't exercise. And, and some of them, a lot of them, many of them will not get cancer. And for whatever reason, it's just...
Exactly. Yeah. But you can't spend your life worrying about it, because if you spend your life worrying about it, think about it. You're thinking about the thing that you don't want, but you're thinking about it. So you're giving it power. So you're kind of like manifesting something that you don't want. So don't think about it.
Right. That's totally something that I could benefit from, figuring more of that out. But it is interesting when, I'm volunteering in a grief counselor spaces. I'm doing a weekly podcast on grief, right? And I also mentor a 9-year-old whose mom. I'll just share this with you because I think it's
that's
really
amazing.
But have you heard of the Big Sisters program?
Of course, yes.
So it's equivalent to that. It's specific to cancer families, and I was matched with a 9-year-old last year whose mom had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And I was hesitant, but so does my mom. And I've already been volunteering as grief counselor for teens for a long time. And I thought I can do this. And then her mom, a few months later, didn't make it. And so it's been,
sorry.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it's been really, really, of course, challenging, rewarding. It's definitely the best thing I've ever done, but really humbling and eye-opening.
And triggering. You've been triggered. How could it not trigger you? For so many different reasons.
Yes. And I just feel so strongly for, of course, anyone grieving the loss of their mom, but that young and also from an underprivileged community without financial resources, doesn't have a dad. Like, this is big stuff, right? So, and you have to look at that. And that's why I'm really passionate about BRCA advocacy and genetic testing as well. As her mom did test positive for BRCA, which to me, in 2021, there is no excuse for a single mom to die of breast cancer who has the gene. I mean, unfortunately, many people don't have the gene, and we don't really fully know how we can predict those cases. But for people with the gene, they need to be screened and monitored so it's caught early, or at least caught not at the end phase of their life. So that's why I'm passionate about genetic testing. It's heartbreaking that there's not more information, even to this day. I mean, do you speak with people still who have no idea what it is? Because I do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking that we've come so far, yet we have so far to go. But I feel like, this platform and you saying that and speaking about it is a way to educate people. And science has come so far, and I feel like we're on the brink of coming so much farther. So we'll get there. I really have faith and hope that we really will, for my daughters and, for you and for that little girl. But she's so lucky to have you. So lucky.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, I think the power that we all have is underestimated. I mean, I'm just such a fan of people giving back in any way. People are like, how do you do that? Like, she called me first when her mom died. It was like really, really tough. But some people don't have someone, and it's like, well, why not me? And why not you? And why not the person listening? Like, yeah, I'm not a therapist. And yes, she should have a therapist. And it's really unacceptable and heartbreaking that she doesn't. But a lot of people aren't going to. Okay, well, what's one small thing you can do, if not in a mentorship state, but in giving back, sharing your story? You've written books about your experiences. Like, that's also valuable. So thank you for what you're doing and sharing your story.
Yeah, I love that. I used to volunteer on the cancer floor in the room, in the big chemo room.
Wow.
I did that for a long time until I started traveling a lot with speaking. And I'm actually probably about to start doing it again because I really miss it. people would say to me, like, is it so hard for you to go to that room? Are you not terrified to go there? And I was like, no, there's so much love and hope. And I am so inspired every time I walk into that room. It's like a gift for me to be able to go in there. But also, what I loved about it is I could look into the faces of all these women that had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I could say to them, like, look at me. It's been almost 8 years and I'm out and I'm happy and I'm making the most of my life. And you can do this too. And I don't have a counseling degree, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, like I have, good old fashioned life experiences, and so do you. And I think that when someone is going through a really hard time, they want to look at someone who's been through it and they want to be able to see like that person made it through. Okay, maybe I'm strong enough. Maybe I can do it too.
I love that. Absolutely. And in many cases, it's even preferred to
Totally.
hear from someone without the clinical degree.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh, you're like more
a real
like
person.
Me, like a person in the world. So
yeah.
that makes sense. Have you ever worked with or spoken for the Young Survivors Coalition? I'm curious.
I haven't, but I would love that.
Yeah. You're like, that's next on the list. That's just, yeah. Curious. I went to their conference before COVID, but they do a yearly conference, and it's people who have survived cancer aged 20s through 40s. And it's a really wonderful group. I know you've spoken at.
Yeah, no, I would love that. Although I'm a little bit older than that.
That's totally fair. But hey, it's like young motherhood and being 42. I mean, that's on the younger side of getting
for sure. I
think so. Yes. And I'm glad you brought up your books and your speaking. I love what you're doing. It's incredible. And I know that creating happiness is a part of all of your work. What does creating happiness look like to you?
I do believe that everyone has the right to be happy. And it's not something that I ever really thought about until I went through cancer and until I found myself in that space. And I was like, okay, am I going to be completely terrified, or am I going to like figure out how to be happy? So like, I never really thought about it, but for me, happiness is, figuring out what my purpose is, what my passion is, and then giving myself permission to put my time there, because, time is our most precious commodity, and the way we choose to spend our time. And I don't care what you do every single day, you have a choice of how you spend your time. The way we choose to spend our time really impacts how we feel, and our joy, our joyfulness, and if we're filling ourselves up or if we're depleting ourselves. And so I just sort of gave myself permission to kind of figure that out for myself, and it's a work in progress. I mean, life is throwing us lessons all the time, and I'm constantly asking myself, like, is this what I want to be doing now? Or, what feels right now? And that's what makes life fun, is that, we don't have it all figured out. Like, it's exciting. We can all do anything we want to do. We just have to kind of figure out what we want to do and then find a way to do it. But I'm 100% convinced that anyone can do anything they want to do. It's the stories we tell ourselves that get in the way of us living a happy, beautiful life. And so, you've got to shift your thinking and shift the story and, all the things. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but anything worth having is worth working for. And, I think our happiness is worth it.
That was so well said. I feel like I was at one of your talks just now. Like, yes, everything you just said. Yes, it's so beautiful. And the stories that we tell ourselves, right? It's like, it's us holding us back some of the time. And I hate to admit that. It's a lot easier for me to say, wow, these external circumstances have really not been in my favor lately. Like, oh, this girl really lucked out. Like, wow. It's like, and maybe those things are true. Like sometimes when someone says that's absolutely not true, I'm like, you know what? Actually, maybe it is. And that doesn't serve me moving forward. So I like to be devil's advocate. Some people say, look, that's not true. I think, well, it could be, but it also doesn't help you get anywhere. So what can you do to take your next step?
Yeah. I mean, it's basically like what we decide to fill what we decide to fill our minds with. Like the thoughts that we have absolutely impact us and have power. And and change everything about our experience. And so, if you want to be gossipy, or if you want to feel sorry for yourself, or if you want to be jealous, or if you want to compare yourself to other people, that's your right. But be aware that that's your choice too.
And that's what I'm going to marinate on for the rest of the day. Since you mentioned your books and your speaking, I think it's really, really fascinating. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and people, passionate about wanting to share their stories who listen. What was it like transitioning from being a financial advisor to these things? And you've seen much success. Do you have a couple takeaways that you can share with listeners who might be trying to do something in that vein?
For starters, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I just, I want to say that. I did not have an assistant. I didn't have anyone helping me. It was just Dara with a laptop, and a desire to take the risk and start writing and find my voice. And I, made the decision early on that if I was going to write something, it was going to be from my heart, but it was going to be super honest and real. I was exposed, and that took a little while to figure out how that felt, but you've got to be willing to hear no a lot, and it can't get in the way of you continuing to go forward. And so I've made a ton of mistakes. I look back and think why did I do that? Or I shouldn't have done that, but it's okay. I mean, that's how we learn. But also, I've also kind of given myself permission to say okay, it's because it's so easy to find someone on social media and think oh my God, I want to be like them, right? It's so easy. But what we don't see is their team of 10 or their publicist or whatever who's making it all happen, and they make it look so easy. And then we think okay, I need to be doing this because she's doing this. So I need to be doing this. And finally, I early on just kind of decided I've got to figure out what I want to do and do it for what fills me up, not compare myself to what other people are doing and do it because I think I should do it. And so for anyone listening, I literally, we've heard it all before, what's your why? But it is super relevant when you're trying to figure out what you want to do and how you want to spend your time, because, it really does dictate some of the choices that you make. What is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? What is the goal? And it can change. What you're doing today might not be what you want to be doing next year, because we grow and we evolve. But I've had so much fun with my platform, Crazy Perfect Life. And, my first book was Crush Cancer. My second book just released in this past September, I Am My Mother's Daughter. And it's all about the connection between mothers and daughters from one generation to the next, and loss and love, and, how you can grow and solidify your relationships and all the things. And I never would have thought that I would have written that book. And now I'm working on a fiction book, and I really want to write fiction. And I'm also, speaking a lot, but you have to make your own choices, and we have a limited amount of time. And I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I really haven't done any work for the past 5 or 6 weeks. And I didn't decide to not do work. It wasn't intentional. Meaning I didn't sit down at the calendar and say I'm going to take the next 5 or 6 weeks off. And I'm, doing a little bit of work, but I'm not there's no active work going on. But my daughters are both going to college soon. And I think I just sort of subconsciously decided I want to spend every possible moment with them when they want to be around me. I've just kind of been really available to them. And I never will regret that, And so maybe that means that I haven't written anything in the last 6 weeks, but that's okay. So it just goes back to what's important to you and what your why is. And you're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. And just have fun with it, whatever it is. Don't take it too serious.
I love that. And I love the honesty and the image of you with your laptop. I mean, that's how so many dreams are started, right? So many projects are born. You're just at the blank page, what's going to happen? And then something does happen. So that's incredible. And I love that you did that and are doing it and continuing to do it. I mean, writing a book, I think, is so amazing. Like, so many people want to write a book and you did it twice. So congratulations on having those
Thank
out,
you.
published, available. Like, was that just the best feeling the first time that your book came out?
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you, because I'm only honest. Like the first time that I had a literary agent in New York, and we kept pitching it out, and it didn't get purchased. And I wasn't a famous person. I had a platform, but it wasn't, I don't know, maybe I had like 50,000 followers. I can't ever remember, but it wasn't like in their eyes, enough. And they kept like the shelf was crowded, if you will. That was like what we kept hearing. But so I kind of checked my ego at the door, and I self-published my first book, Crush Cancer. And that didn't look the way I wanted it to look. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but that's really what jump-started all my speaking. And, I think for anyone starting out, like, it's okay if something doesn't go the way you initially thought in your mind that it was going to go, because it can end up being better than you ever thought. So just be flexible. Don't like be married to it has to be this way. But also whatever you put out, just make sure it's like top quality and that you feel really good about anything that you do and anything that you put out. And that's what I did with Crush Cancer. And then when it came time for me to get I Am My Mother's Daughter published, I was able to sell that book, and that felt amazing. And, that was such a different experience. But I feel like everything that I do, and hopefully your listeners, everything that you do is it's a step up the ladder, And so we're just building on the next thing. So it's okay if it doesn't look exactly like you think it should look now, because, you just keep at it. You keep trying. You don't quit.
I love that. Well, congrats on selling this book. That's
Thank
huge.
you.
And congrats on self-publishing the first book. I mean, I think I've definitely heard stories like that of like, yeah, I mean, it seems really competitive to get a book published, to get anything out there, certainly. Yeah. And it's a lot. And I have friends that write movies, and yeah, that it's like all competitive. But another thing, I mean, I haven't written a book, but I think something that's really cool is like, wow, imagine if, 20, 30, I don't know, however many years ago, if someone didn't pick up your book, there wasn't online platforms, so it would literally go nowhere. I mean, how great that it can still be available to be purchased, and you can go this other route. I mean, sure, do the thing you want to do and not just default to X, Y, or Z because it's an option, but thank goodness it's not just like, well, guess it's going to be a manuscript in my drawer, closing the desk now. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you bring up such a good point, which is like, after I self-published Crush Cancer, I started doing a lot of speaking and leading workshops. No one ever said to me, Dara, who is your publisher? Like nobody ever asked me that. And I stand behind the quality of that book. Like I hired an editor, and I mean, I, again, made sure that it was like that I felt really good about the quality. And that is so important. Like I cannot stress that enough, but whatever you want to do, you can find a way to do it. It just might not look the way that you want it to look. And like I said, like I'm thrilled that I was able to sell I Am My Mother's Daughter. And it was in the most incredible, joyful experience of my professional life, working with my publisher. And, all I want is to write another book and get to do it, because nothing makes me happier than when I'm working with an editor. And it's so fun, but you got to put the time in, you've got to put the work in. And if you want to write a book, you got to be writing every day, and so it doesn't write itself.
Right. I'm like, damn it. What do you mean? It doesn't. No, I'm sure. It's so much work, and yet so much of a reward at the end, because you did that. Everyone says it's like one of the most grueling but rewarding processes. So again, congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, like I'm the happiest version of myself when I am in the middle of writing when I'm working on a project that speaks to my heart. I'm so excited to give myself when my daughters go to college, and I'm going to be so sad and, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also like saving this fiction book to be just like to dive in, because, that's going to be a good thing for me to have to turn to. Yeah.
What a great project. Do you feel like sharing what?
Yeah.
Can you?
So, I mean, I already have like 50,000 words, but yeah, it's a suburban fiction. It's sort of like, it has steamy sex scenes in it.
Oh my gosh. Yes, girl. Did not expect that. I'm
know,
so excited.
Right? I'm actually really good at writing sex scenes. Who would know? Who would think that? My daughters will be so mortified. Oh my God. They're going to be like, so I already embarrassed the shit out of them anyway, but they're going to be like, you are not my mom. And I'm going to be like, you are your mother's daughter.
Like, how do you think you got here, honey child? Like,
exactly. Yeah. So, it's just fun. And, I know it'll be hard. I know it'll be a lot of work, but that's okay.
Amazing. Wait, something just came to mind. I wonder, I know you already have like written so much of it. How much is 50,000 words, by the way?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay. Is that like 10 chapters? I'm just curious. I have no idea.
Well, like my book right now, I Am My Mother's Daughter. I think that might be 50,000. Like, I don't know. It might be 50 to 60,000 words. So there can be books that are 50,000. Yeah. But it's not clean or polished or,
Right. Okay, cool. Well, maybe not for this one, but I was just thinking that could be really cool if a young or however old she is, doesn't matter, but cancer patient was doing sex scenes. So it was like honoring the illness, but still the sexuality.
Yeah. She doesn't have that.
Next book.
So yeah, that's interesting. Let me just marinate with that.
Yeah, or even someone like who has the BRCA mutation and is getting a double mastectomy, and maybe like she does a sex scene when she's flat in between surgeries.
That's interesting.
Yes, you would be great. You'd be the perfect person to put that together. Yeah, next book. No
that's
pressure.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know there's so much around sexuality.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
To all the listeners, stay tuned. Just kidding.
Right? Because there's so much around sexuality in general, but especially when you're going through things and you don't feel like
Well, and I don't think we talk enough about that actually. Like what it feels like to go through all of that and be comfortable with your sexuality. I feel like that's another podcast episode.
Yes. Okay. That's like our next year follow-up / when your next book comes out. And then in terms of World of Speaking, I know that's a whole other platform, but that's just so interesting. And I know so many people who want to get involved. What was the first step you took towards speaking? Getting the speech, finding an outlet, and just getting out there?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the first thing is just, you got to be willing to put yourself out there. And you've got to be willing to, like, that was when my book Crush Cancer came out. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to get in front of audiences. I don't have a publisher. So I got to start speaking. And so then you have to contact places and you have to be willing to give your time for free. And you do a lot of that, especially at the beginning. And then eventually you start getting paid for it. But even now, there's a lot of times that especially when my book came out, especially over Zoom. I mean, my whole book tour basically went virtual. So, you just do things, you connect with people. And I think if you're doing it from a place of, again, like just open, honest desire to help other people and share, then people feel that. And, most of the time when I do a speaking gig, I get asked by people in the audience to do other speaking things. So that's pretty much what happened to me over the pandemic. Like I would Zoom in and then I would get 2 people would ask me to Zoom into their groups, and it just kind of happened. But I did recently sign with the Speakers Bureau, and I'm excited to see what happens with that. I feel like right now with COVID, I feel like there's a lot of unknowns right now with, are we going to have live events or are we going to go back to Zoom? And, so we have to be flexible. So who knows? We can't control it.
Who knows? But eventually, there will always be need for speakers. Like, Zoom and not Zoom. So it is something that will always be needed. Great. And for your first few speeches, did you have it word for word? Did you riff off the cuff, like something in between?
So I did PowerPoints. Like I remember showing up at this one speech. It was one of my first ones. And it was like 70 people. I'd probably maybe done like 5 or 6 events, but it was like 70 people. And I had my PowerPoint and we get there and the clicker doesn't work. Like the clicker to the PowerPoint doesn't work. So every time I wanted to go to another slide, I had to like make eye contact with the president of this organization. And it was like this huge room. It was just so awkward because I needed the PowerPoint to remind me of what I was going to say next, but I had to find the president to like move the slide forward. You know what? You do the best you can and you learn and you just laugh about it, right? Like so that everyone who is ever going to speak is always going to have stuff like that. It's just part of it.
Yeah. I love that. Very, very cool. Oh, I was going to say very, very, very cool. Why was I going to say cool?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is you just can't,
relatable.
You just can't take yourself so seriously. I mean, I remember another time, I'll just share this really fast. I was speaking at the nursing school at a really large university. And the night before, my whole family, they traveled with me. My daughter was going to tour the school. My whole family got food poisoning in the airport. And so we were all super sick, like so sick. And I had to speak at the nursing school the next morning. And I remember like forcing myself up, and I was like completely pale and my hands were like shaking because I had, not eaten anything and I had been throwing up for like the whole night. And I remember speaking to this nursing school, and I just remember like I never said anything to them, like I never told them, but shit happens and you just deal with it and you just keep moving on.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. That sounds awful. Food poisoning is wild. I mean, it is one of the worst feelings. You're just like, get it out. And then, yeah. Anyways, we won't go into that. I'm like, I have some stories, but I will not share.
No, but I mean, the point is that shit happens and you just deal with it. And now then you go on a podcast and you laugh about it.
Totally. And with this, since the Dying of Laughter podcast, I do like to ask, is there any comedic or funny stories surrounding your grief journey or life journey? And you've shared a few. Anything else coming to mind while we're here?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many stories, like so many ways that I feel connected to my mom now, even, just weird things that happen that I'll think like, okay, there's no way, like, how did that happen? Or why did that, and I'll just kind of feel like my mom's there. Like I'll feel her presence and I feel like she's, whispering in my ear, and I love all of that. So I'm really open to that. And I pay attention to those signs, and, I feel like they're really there. So, I have a lot of that kind of stuff.
I love that. So beautiful. Do you have, and before I ask where people can find you online, do you have a book, podcast, film, or resource that helped you either through your grief or something that's helped you today?
I think podcasts like this, where people really openly talk about grief, is so helpful. When my mom passed away, it was over 20 years ago, we didn't have these types of platforms. And so I just felt really alone. And so, this kind of podcast where we're talking openly and honestly about life cycle events that every single person is going to have to go through, it makes you feel not so alone. And when we all connect with each other, I mean, I feel like everyone wins. And so, these types of resources that you're providing to your listeners, it's such a gift. So I hope all your listeners realize what a gift you are to them.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. That is so nice of you. And I so appreciate that. And hey, it's weird how podcasts, they haven't been around that long. I even wish I didn't feel like I had someone to talk to, 10 years ago even. And it's thank gosh for podcasts in general, and books, and people finding you online, and your things that are available with a click on Amazon is so amazing.
It is. It's amazing. Yeah. And, I think I read something like over 20,000 kids lost a parent to COVID. And so, when we don't talk about these types of things, that doesn't help. So it's when we all are willing to be vulnerable and open and honest and share, everyone wins and we don't feel so alone. But anyone can follow me on Facebook. That's where my largest platform is, at Crazy Perfect Life. And then definitely on Instagram at Crazy Perf Life. I didn't set them up at the same time. See, that was an example of a mistake that I made, but whatever. So
no, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perf.
So it's perf. Yeah. So please follow me. I would love it.
Of course. Yes. Well, thank you for plugging those. And will you just share the names of your books one more time?
Yeah, thank you. So my most recent, I Am My Mother's Daughter, Wisdom on Life, Loss and Love. It's available, of course, on, wherever you get your books, of course, Amazon. You can also get a signed copy from my indie bookstore, and you can get that by going to my website, which is at it's crazyperfectlife.com. I also have free gifts that anyone who buys my book from any platform can go to my website, crazyperfectlife.com, and download some free, amazing printables that they can begin using. They're tools that they can begin using to help strengthen their relationships. And that's where they can find me, and email me, or if you're looking for a speaker for something, just feel free to email me. I love hearing from people, and me or someone on my team, my very small team, we'll get back to you soon.
Of course. Lovely. Well, it was so great getting to meet you, Dara. I so appreciate you sharing your story.
Oh, so fun. Thank you for having me. You are a beautiful soul, and I just feel really connected, and I love that, I feel like we have a lot in common. So it's lovely to meet you, and feel free to reach out to me if I can support you in any way.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Ditto. I appreciate it. This is my favorite part about social media, right? Like,
yeah,
cool people,
it is. It's such a gift.
Yodo, you only die once.